I still remember the first time I saw the Sailor Moon cartridge sitting in a rental shop's glass case. Back then, I wasn't thinking about game design, genre conventions, or whether a beat-em-up had enough depth. I just knew that Sailor Moon meant something magical. The bright colors, the confidence of the characters, the optimism of the show. Something about that energy pulled me in. So when I finally got my hands on the SNES game, I popped it into the console with this mix of excitement and curiosity. And even today, when I look back, that feeling hasn't faded. Sailor Moon on the Super Nintendo is, at its core, a side-scrolling beat-em-up. It follows the formula established by the classics. Move to the right, punch a wave of enemies, grab some health, take down a boss, and repeat. It's simple, and honestly, that simplicity is part of its charm. But replaying it now, with all the experience and expectations I've built up over the years, it's fascinating to see what this game actually does well and where it shows its age. The first thing that hits you is the visual style. SNES games had a very distinct look, and Sailor Moon embraces every pixel of that era's aesthetic. Each Sailor Scout has unique animations, little flourishes in the way they run, their idle stances, even their attack frames. There's personality in the sprite work, and that's something I appreciate even more now than I did back then. Modern games are packed with detail, but there's something uniquely expressive about a hand-drawn sprite that moves like it has its own heartbeat. The stages are bright, colorful, and clearly inspired by the show's settings, even if they sometimes feel a bit flat by today's standards. And while the presentation feels charmingly preserved in time, the gameplay, well, that's where the perspective of today's player comes in. Beat-em-ups back then were designed around repetition. Walk forward, punch enemies, maybe use a special move that costs health. Sailor Moon follows that traditional structure pretty closely. You can mash your attack button for a basic combo, throw enemies if you get close, and unleash a special technique when you're overwhelmed. The problem is that these actions don't always feel as responsive or as weighty as modern players might expect. Combat can feel a bit stiff, and some hitboxes are strangely narrow or floaty. But here's the thing, I still find myself having fun with it. Not in the modern, tight combat system, skill trees, unlockable sense, more in a comforting, familiar way. It's the kind of game where you feel a warm little spark just from hearing the soundtrack, even if the songs loop more quickly than you'd like. It's the kind of game where you appreciate small details, like how Sailor Mars has a slight dash, or how Sailor Jupiter hits a bit harder, or how Sailor Venus has this playful flair in her moves. The Scouts aren't wildly different in terms of mechanics, but the subtle differences add a layer of personality that keeps the game from feeling too one-note. Playing it now, I realize how much of the experience relies on mood. Back then, I was fully immersed. I felt like I was stepping into the world of the show. The enemies felt intimidating, the bosses seemed huge, and the soundtrack pumped me up like I was part of the team. When I play it today, I can recognize the simplicity, the repetition, and the occasional rough edges. Yet I can also appreciate that this game wasn't trying to be anything other than a straightforward, accessible beat-em-up for fans. And in a way, that makes it almost refreshing. Modern gamers, especially those who didn't grow up with the SNES, might wonder whether this game still holds up mechanically. If you're used to the smooth, combo-heavy systems of recent beat-em-ups, Sailor Moon may feel slow at first. But if you approach it with the mindset of, this is a time capsule, the pacing starts to make sense. Enemies move in deliberate patterns, the stages follow a simple rhythm, and bosses rely on recognizable loops that were common in older games. There's a structure to it that feels almost meditative once you settle into it. Another thing to consider is its difficulty. Sailor Moon has that old-school challenge where enemies can stun-lock you if you're not careful, and some boss attacks do more damage than they probably should. Back then, I didn't really think about balance issues. I just kept trying until I made it through. Today, I can see the imperfections more clearly, but I also understand how these rough spots gave the game its identity. It wasn't trying to be perfectly fair. It was trying to be engaging, memorable, and fun to master. What really stands out to me now is the co-op. Playing Sailor Moon with a friend transforms the game. The pacing feels better, the combat feels more dynamic, and the whole experience becomes surprisingly energetic. It's a reminder that many SNES beat-em-ups were built around the idea of playing shoulder to shoulder with someone, sharing laughs and moments of chaos. When modern players approach it with that social mindset, the game's shortcomings become part of the charm rather than a frustration. And then there's the nostalgia factor. Even if you didn't grow up with Sailor Moon, there's something about the SNES's sound and visual style that hits a very particular emotional note. For me, the game is wrapped up in memories of sitting on the floor, cross-legged, with snacks on the table, and no responsibilities waiting for me. I can still hear the cartridge clicking into place, feel the slight heat from the console after a long play session, and remember the excitement of beating a stage I had struggled with before. When I revisit the game now, I'm not just playing it, I'm revisiting that moment in time. So, should you play Sailor Moon SNES today? Honestly, I think it depends on what you're looking for. If you want a deep, mechanically complex beat-em-up, this isn't going to compete with modern offerings. If you want a polished remake with updated systems and flashy moves, this game won't check that box either. But if you appreciate retro charm, if you enjoy simple but satisfying gameplay loops, if you're a fan of Sailor Moon, or if you're curious about how licensed games used to feel, then there's absolutely value in revisiting this one. It's a game that reflects the era it came from, bright, earnest, a little clunky in spots, but full of heart. Whether you're chasing nostalgia or discovering an old gem for the first time, Sailor Moon on the SNES offers a kind of experience you don't find often anymore. And sometimes, that alone is enough to make it worth your time. In the end, I still enjoy returning to this game because it reminds me why I fell in love with gaming in the first place. The joy of discovery, the delight of familiar characters, the thrill of overcoming challenges, and the comfort of a world that feels safe and inviting. Those feelings are timeless, and if a game can still make you feel that, even after all these years, then yes, it's absolutely worth playing today.